You're listening to Worshipology with Curtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about living and leading worship. Let's lean into today's episode.
Well, hey, thanks so much for tuning into Worshipology today. I'm so excited because I'm talking to my friend Brian Beihl, one of the best dudes I met during our entire time in Nashville. And Brian is a drummer, he's a husband, a dad, a worshiper to the max, and excited for this conversation. Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Dude, you got to remind me. So did we first connect, was it on Instagram and you were in DC?
It was actually we connected through Micah Tyler.
That's
through
right.
Instagram. Yeah, because he was on tour with us at the time, and we started talking about, because we were doing some shows kind of around DC area, and he was like,
Yeah.
he goes, I know somebody that is with NCC and all this, and so yeah, he was like, Curtis Parks, you gotta check him out, and. So I was like, yeah. So we just kind of started like following each other on Instagram, and then just started this relationship and this friendship, over the years, which has been really awesome.
Oh man, it's been a huge blessing. I know you and Kim, and of course now you got little Tate. I mean, we love you guys, and you've been touring with Big Daddy Weave for how long now?
Man, 9.5 years.
Wow.
January will be 10 years. So.
And just give the listeners like maybe a snapshot of your story. I mean, how did you get involved in not just drums, but music in general? And then like with that specific lens, I mean, obviously Big Daddy Weave on the radio, CCM, you guys have had number ones, but really a heart of worship has kind of thread through all of those songs. And tell us just how you got involved, man.
Man, well, obviously music has been such a big part of my life since I was a kid. Several people in my family played music and just got involved in it at a young age and started getting into recording and, playing out and doing just different, family reunions and just different little things just to kind of get out and play. But I always had the desire to move to Nashville and to be a musician and play music. That's what I wanted to do. And I did the whole kind of country scene for a while and played down like on Lower Broadway at Nashville and some of the honky tonks and stuff, kind of getting started, just kind of getting out there and weekend gigs here and there. But it's like those gigs always kind of had this highlight for a moment, but then there was really nothing on the backside of that. It was like, it was fun to do some shows and do some different things, but it just kind of felt empty. And my wife and I were talking for a while, just like, what is it that I really want to do? And what is it that I, want to kind of get into? Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to get into worship, and I wanted to get into, something that had a little bit more meaning, and had more impact. And so just through her kind of just, kind of helping me walk through that a little bit and telling me like, hey, you should reach out to this guy named Jim who was at our church, and he was in the music business. He was manager, these different things. And she's like, he's in it. He's doing it. She said, you should just go talk to him and kind of see what you can do. And I was like, yeah, sure. So we went, we had coffee and we talked, and I just kind of shared with him, like I want to get involved in Christian music, and, I don't really have an in, and I just wanted to, just kind of get my foot in the door. Playing just, filling in for somebody or whatever, just to kind of get my foot in there. And he's like, yeah, he goes, I would, if I hear of anything, I can let you know. And, at that time I was doing little gigs here and there, nothing much. And he calls me, at that time we met, it was like around October, and he called me in December, and he was like, hey, I have this opportunity coming up, and, Big Daddy Weave is going to be looking for a new drummer in January. And he goes, is that something you would like to, does that interest you? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love the opportunity to come and to audition and do all that. So I, got that call, and a couple weeks later they called and we're like, okay, here's the audition dates. And they gave me, 6 or 7 songs to kind of learn and go through, and went and did the whole audition. And I was kind of the odd guy out, if you will. It was like they didn't know anything about me. They're kind of like, who is this country guy coming in to play, Christian music? And
Wow.
they knew all the other guys.
And a couple. Obviously, for those that don't know, Big Daddy Weave, it was a couple of brothers that started it, right?
Yeah, they started in college. It was Mike Weaver, who's the lead singer, and then Jay Weaver, his brother who played bass, and then Jeremy Redmond playing guitar, and Joe Shirk playing keys and sax at the time. And they formed in college. It was around that time when Dave Matthews was really popular, and so they had the saxophone and all the kind of jam band kind of thing, which is really cool. And so it was like they've been around for, at that time, it'd been 14 years. Doing their thing. And the drummer at the time just decided to kind of pursue some other things, and decided to leave the band and leave the road and everything. So came in, auditioned, and the guys were blown away by what I kind of brought to the table. And we sat down afterward and just had a really great conversation, just getting to talk and kind of learn a little bit about each other, and really just found out that we had, kind of in common, just a heart for missions, and helping and all around the world. We've been kind of all over the place with different organizations, and going around and just seeing kind of what they do in these countries and how they help people all over the world, And we just had that connection, and I feel like it was something that the Lord was really putting in place, it's so crazy, but they had people praying for that whole process. And, like they obviously didn't know anything about me. They knew stuff about the other guys. But they got a word that said, this person that you're going to hire, will be, highlighted, So there were things that just came up, it's like they didn't know anything about me. I was kind of the odd guy. So that kind of was, something that stood out from all the other people that were auditioning. Wow. And, so it was like I was kind of definitely highlighted through that process a little bit. And it was really, man, it was just the Lord just kind of guiding that whole process, and he put me in a place that has just been incredible.
I want to kind of pause here because it's so interesting. I'm talking to, this podcast is for worship leaders and worship teams, and we're listening to you share your story. And a big part of it starts with an audition. And I think, a lot of us in our church roles maybe got there through an audition for the worship team, or as worship leaders, worship pastors, we're auditioning musicians and vocalists. And I want to ask you, Brian, what was that process like in preparing for the audition, so that as worship leaders and team members that are listening, we can kind of listen to your perspective in that process and apply it to our context? Because I know it's a huge thing when you basically do an audition for a worship team. Some people don't know how to prepare. Some people don't prepare at all. Some people kind of lean on the whole, well, it's all heart and then it's all skill. And I think it has to be a marriage of the two. And what I love about your story is that you brought the excellence in your skill, but then you also had this connection, this heart moment with the band where you got to know each other's story. So just for those that are listening, kind of dive into that process a little bit. What does that look like for an audition, and how can we be doing better auditions, not just in skill, but to really hear people's heart?
Yeah, man. So I kind of go a little bit over the top with that kind of stuff. Anytime I am playing with someone, auditioning for Big Daddy Weave or different things, I want to make sure that I am doing my absolute best, and I'm delivering what is expected of me for the role that I'm playing, And so I went in, and it was kind of crazy because at that time we had some family coming into town, and got the call, hey, the audition's going to be this day, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, family's in town, but I've got to run these songs. I've got to learn these songs, So we carved out time with my family and everything. They're gone doing whatever. It's like, I got to be home. I got to run over this stuff. And man, I would sit and I would watch YouTube videos. I would find clips of them playing. Wow. And I would watch like how they interacted with each other. I would watch their just stage presence. I would watch like the arrangements of the songs, like how they were playing these songs, what changed from the record, that they were doing live. And I would set up a video camera and I would record myself playing these songs and go through that whole process. And then I would kind of go back and watch it and be like, okay, I'm playing a little too tense. I need to loosen up a little bit as I'm playing, just to make it feel and look like I've been with the band for years.
Yeah.
It's like I wanted to step in that role and them to be like, man, there's not been a change. Like it just kind of carried on. There was nothing, that just stood out in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating to me. It's so fascinating to me, the video piece, because I think that's so key, especially now through COVID, how so many churches have kind of upped their online game. And I think if you're not doing church online, you're missing a huge opportunity.
Absolutely.
But it also gives a lot of worship teams a chance to kind of, how like a football team will play a game on Sunday and on Monday they're watching footage.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we missed that play, or man, we could have ran this a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the best evaluation tools for a worship team on the side of just tightening up musicianship. Are we smiling on stage? Are we playing together? Do we look like we're having a great time praising the Lord,
Yeah.
And so I love that, man, that you not only watched footage, but then you videoed yourself to kind of see all of those things, because playing and worshiping isn't just sonic. It's our full body. I mean, David writes in the Psalms, like, raise your hands and bow down. I mean, worship is so much posture as it is playing and singing. So I love that, man. Keep going, because it's so good.
Yeah. And, I would just watch that. And, I really just wanted that to it's when you join a band, you just want to feel like you've played these songs, 1,000 times. Like you've got it down, and you know the parts, the feel is there, the groove is there. If there's, any, hits or different little things that's kind of going on, you want to make sure you're nailing these things to make it just feel right. And so I did that, and I just rehearsed that and rehearsed it and would play it and be like, no, I can tighten this up better. And I would go over intros of songs and, 500 times, just playing it over and over and over and over, just till I could get just the phrasing of something to feel right, and to feel natural, and be comfortable with it. And I think that's really what helped to go into the audition. I felt really relaxed, really confident in what I was doing, and just got in there and just did what I needed to do and nailed the audition. That was my whole goal. Like I wanted it to just make it easy for them to play along to what I was doing. I feel like that's being a drummer, that is the foundation, of the music, is having that great solid beat there that's consistent, that the rest of the band can play on top of, and it helps them to play better and to feel more relaxed and comfortable in what they're doing too.
Now, let me ask you this, because as a drummer, obviously you have a different perspective on the music, and on stage, you're kind of sitting back, taking it all in. You can see most people in front of you. And how important is it? Like, and we've had the opportunity dozens of times, Brian, to lead worship together, whether it was at Bridges, Nashville, Aspen Grove, or for a different event. We've gotten the opportunity to do that. How important is it for a worship leader to connect with the drummer on stage? Because I'll be honest, most of these podcasts have been with worship leaders, artists, and songwriters, but we haven't yet had a conversation. You're the first one where it's been, hey, my primary role is musician, is to take this not from the microphone spot, but really from a musician standpoint. So how important is it for those worship leaders that are listening to, hey, man, connect with your drummer? Don't just leave them behind. What does that feel like for you, man?
Yeah. And I will say Mike does a really good job of that. And, just over the years, we've kind of learned each other a little bit, and, the hand signals and the motions. And I can just kind of tell just in sometimes the way he's holding the guitar and what he's doing. Oh, he's going to do this, and it just over time, you kind of learn a lot of that stuff. But, I think in a lot of music, outside of worship and CCM and stuff like that, it's a lot about the high energy and all the chops and all the crazy stuff that can go on. And that's fine and great and all that kind of stuff. But in what we're doing for worship, it's you're taking people on a journey through music in worship. And, my the way I kind of look at it is I'm there to play the song, to do what's needed for that song, bring the energy that needs to be there, but taking people, into the presence of the Lord, in what we're playing. And
so good.
So it's like, yeah, I think being able to have that communication with whoever's leading, because it's like, a song sometimes can go really long depending on the moment and what's happening in the room. It's like, hey, we need to take this up a little bit, or hey, let's bring it down. Let's have kind of a prayer moment here. Let's build it back up and go out. And, so it can change, but I think having that communication and knowing that, a little bit ahead of time is good. But being able to read each other, just to kind of feel like with Mike, I know he wants to sometimes in the moment, he's like feeling something and he wants to talk, or he wants to pray over something, in that moment. So, and being able to sense that from him and being like, oh, hey, we're going to take this down for a little bit, and just being able to read that in the moment, to come down and just to let him have the space to kind of speak for a moment. And then I can just kind of tell in how he's talking and everything, hey, we're going to ramp this back up and we're going to go back in. We're going to do another chorus or something, to kind of finish it out. But yeah, just having that communication, like I said, it comes from just repetition, doing it over and over and over. And you'll pick up on those little things over time.
I think that's so key. Like you can always tell when a band has chemistry off stage, or I guess I would say community off stage. That you can tell that leaks into the chemistry they have on stage, because you can see how they know each other and where you're going. And I think that's so key, because sometimes as a worship leader, you're locked into the songs, you're praying with the team, you're preparing all the things spirit wise, practical wise, leadership wise. And then you get up there, and without that synergy with the band, things can quickly fall apart. Yeah. And I think that's so key that you're saying this, because for the worship leaders and the musicians that are listening, knowing that, man, it's so much more than just playing the songs. It is an anointing that gels the team together. I would always tell the team when I was leading worship, whether it was with Bridges or at National Community or whatever I've been doing, I kind of get the team together, especially if it's a brand new band that I'm just stepping in with, maybe as a guest. And I say, hey, like, let's be watching each other. Like, let's not tune out. We've got to tune in to each other as we're tuning in to the Holy Spirit and what God's doing in the room. Yeah. And man, let's just pause there. Like, what does that look like? How do you as a drummer, man, how do you tune into this? How do you play spirit led? Because that's one of the things we ask a lot is, how do you lead spirit led when you're kind of on that microphone leading worship? But how do you play with that spirit, tuning into the musicians and what God's doing and sensing those moments? And even further than that, Brian, what does it look like to lead worship without a microphone?
Yeah. For me, I was never the one to want to be in front. Like, I felt very comfortable being in the back, so that's why I play the drums. It's like I'm behind. I can kind of hide behind my drums and do what I do, and not be the one kind of out there, kind of in the leading position. That was never what I felt like where I needed to be, I guess. But man, leading from drums, it is kind of a different way of looking at it, and some people will be like, how do you lead from drums? But you do. I mean, you collectively are doing this together, and I think our prayer every night, as a band, is just like, God, just come and have your way, and just do what you're going to do. Like, we're gonna play our songs, we're gonna do what it is that we're called to do. But God, in the midst of that, and while that's going on, if you come in and lay something on our hearts to be like, actually, we're gonna throw this song in the set now because we just feel like in the moment this is what needs to speak to the people that are in the audience. we're gonna yield to that and do it. We had moments for several years where, in the middle of our set, we would just kind of stop, and several of us would come off stage, and we would just go down in front, and we would just pray for people,
Wow.
just being sensitive to that moment. And we kind of knew, like, hey, this is kind of going to happen. We just don't know exactly where. And when we felt like this is the moment, we would just kind of do that. And our keyboard player, Joe, he would just kind of take over and play a few things on the keys, while the rest of us would just kind of come down and just pray and just be there for people, and really just kind of let them know, like, hey, it's not all about the show and the lights and all this kind of stuff. That's fun and that's good, but it's all about having the one-on-one relationship with Jesus, and connecting with him. And if somebody comes and the what they leave with is that they feel like they've been changed and that they've been restored and they've had an encounter with Jesus, then man, praise God, that's awesome. Then we did our job right.
Wow.
It's like, we don't want to come and then just to be like, oh man, that was just an awesome show. That was so great, and leave. And that's great. And it's fun and everything. But it's like, man, we want people to encounter Jesus, and we want people to have a moment where their life can be transformed. If they're really hurting, dealing with something, man, come and sit at the feet of Jesus and just be there and pray and leave things on the floor so you can go home and feel free and feel, this big weight lifted off as you leave.
Man, I love that spirit, because it's like you guys are kind of coming from that concert perspective, but it's not a show. It's more about, like you just said, an encounter with Jesus. And Brian, if I'm honest, if we can just get real for a moment, I think sometimes that rock show, celebrity mindset has crept into the worship service atmosphere in churches, and I've been guilty of it myself, where you're playing with a band and everybody's just crushing it, you're having a blast, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you come off of maybe the platform and you're talking with your bandmates and you're like, man, that was awesome when you hit that on the 4, or you did this run, or you did this fill, or you did that, and then it's like you kind of get your mindset shifted all on the performance aspect of it, and you forget, like, man, the reason we do this is to help people connect to the presence of God, to see lives transformed by the gospel. Yeah. And what do you do to keep that front and center? What is it that you guys have done for the last decade to make sure that, man, it is all about Jesus? It's not about the huge crowds. It's not about, having the number one songs on the radio. Those are all, just kind of frosting on the cake, but it's not the foundation. The foundation is leading people to the foot of the cross. How do you keep that front and center? Yeah.
I think, it's one of those, and even from the beginning when Big Daddy Weave started, it was never them going out and calling to be like, hey, can we come play here? Can we come do this? Can we come do that? The phone just started ringing for people, of people calling them and saying, hey, can you come and do this event? Can you come and do this? And I think from that moment is when it really kind of established, what they're going to do. And it's like, hey, God, if you want this to work and you want us to do what we're doing, then you're going to bring the opportunities, and so, and that's the way it's been, from day one. It's like people call and we go and do their event, and sometimes we go into it and we're just like, okay, why are we here? What's the mission for Big Daddy Weave to be here,
Right.
And I think having that mindset of going in and being like, they're obviously bringing us here because of the message through the music, and what we're bringing through the songs, because they're having that connection and they're encountering Jesus through the music, and then us going to these events and playing these shows and doing these different things, it's like, we're going to come and we're going to minister through our music, and we're going to come and we're going to tell the story of what Jesus has been doing through our lives as a band and individually, through the songs that we play each night. And, I think that's just kind of where we leave it. It's like, okay, we're not about the lights and the haze and all this kind of stuff. And we have all that, and it helps with the show aspect of it, but it's like, our goal is to go in and to minister. And I think that's always kind of at the forefront of our minds, of just like, before anything else, we're going to go and we're going to bring Jesus to these people, regardless of anything else.
What I love about that is that you keep the mission front and center. And I think one of the things that was most effective in my past days as a worship pastor, in my current days as I'm stepping into a new role in Richmond, Virginia as a worship pastor, is to keep the mission front and center. And I would say even in your rehearsal rooms, or, in the room that the band hangs out in, put that front and center. Like, what is our mission here? What is the vision of our church? And how are we carrying that out through the gift of music, through the service of worship? And I mean, I'm just thinking, Brian, of like the football teams. I mean, Friday Night Lights is one of my all-time favorite show. Yeah. And what did he say? What did he say? Like clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose, or something. I probably switched those around, but it was like he said that every single time before they marched out onto the field, and the team got pumped up because their hearts and minds were focused on the vision and the mission of what they were about to do. And I think, man, as a worship team, as like you're saying, bands that play together, it's got to be more than just about the music and the performance. You have to have a mission mindset, and that's what takes it beyond just surface level, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Because that's what Jesus told us to do. Go into all the world and preach the gospel, and and share Jesus with everybody. And everywhere we go, it's like, just because we're doing a Christian concert doesn't mean that everybody that's there is a believer. And, so it's like going and doing that, man. There could be somebody in that crowd that got kind of, pulled along to the night, that may be really struggling with their faith and what they believe and all of that. So it's like delivering a very clear and precise message, and honestly, it just kind of comes down to just something as simple as Jesus loves you, and it's like just that, can speak volumes for people, because maybe they've heard a little bit about Jesus and they're like, well, who is this guy and what is this? And, but you just kind of plant those seeds and just bring that clear message, of what Jesus spoke and what he told us to do,
I think that's huge, because sometimes I think we can get so in autopilot mode that we just think that everybody in the room is a believer. And when we lead worship and when we lead these songs, some of these songs, the lyrics, they are being heard for the very first time through the lens of a non-believer or somebody that has no context for Jesus. And I remember, and you guys actually did this song as one of your singles, Lion and the Lamb.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite worship songs, and obviously, like, it's just so powerful. But for the first time listener who's never read the book of Revelation, has no idea who Jesus is, and you're talking about a lion and a lamb, and they're probably thinking, why are we worshiping animals right now, right? and I think it's so key. Like, you just said it a minute ago about having that clear message, like as a worship leader, taking a moment and saying, hey, this next song comes out of blah, 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 Revelation 5 and 7, that talks about Jesus as the innocent lamb that was slain for our sin. As in Revelation 7, he talks about he's the Lion of Judah. He's fierce and he fights our battles for us, and I think taking those moments, and I love the fact that you just brought that up, like realizing, hey, not everybody here is a Christian. And even those who maybe their faith is in Jesus, but they're struggling right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you minister with that? Okay, so here's if we can kind of go in this direction here. You talked about kind of the band's philosophy and as a collective. What is the personal, this could be like a life verse that drives you to do what you do, but what is the personal with Brian Beihl, like when it comes down to it, what makes you do what you do in the context of musical worship, man?
Oh man. I think, like I said earlier, music has always been something that I've loved and I've dreamed of, just, being in a band and doing that, but man, it is so amazing to get done with a show at night. And I'm usually at the end of the night, I'm usually out in the lobby and helping, with usually our tour sponsor, who's with us, just kind of helping them, and I'm out there and I get to hear stories from people. They'll stop me and say, "Hey, I just need to tell you this. Your song, Redeemed, for example, that song ministered so much to me, and it because of this." And they'll go into their story, and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, I that's amazing!" Like, and it's not something we can do. It's something that the power of God did through our song, But
wow.
when you think about that, it's like, well, okay, it was our song, but yet it was lyrics that were given by God. It's like God helped to kind of deliver this song, and then that song goes out, and that song has touched people's lives, transformed people's lives. We've heard some just crazy stories of just how, in just an instant, like our song has come on and somebody hears it for the first time and they're just like, oh my gosh. And then the next thing you know, their whole life has been transformed, not because of anything we've done, but it's because of what Jesus is doing through us, and for us being obedient in what we're doing, that's I think a big key too. It's like, be obedient to what God has called you to. And then in that, you're going to see tons of just miraculous things happening,
Wow. I think you're telling me that it's the stories that drive you to do what you do.
Yeah.
It's the real life, seeing it in front of you. I think that's so key because, sometimes we can get siloed off if we're, leading worship every Sunday and we don't go out into the congregation and meet people and hear their stories and connect with the people that we're leading every Sunday. And that happens way too often where, we can just silo ourselves off. And honestly, I think that's one of the biggest game-changing moments is when you go out into the lobby and you talk to people that they are singing these songs. And, while it might be like we've played this song or we've led this song 20 times, maybe somebody for the very first time sang it that morning and God just did something in their heart and changed their life forever. And so you got to get out. I think I read a book called Get Out of the Green Room not too long ago. And it was just such a great message of like, you can't just silo yourself off and separate yourself from the people that you're called to lead. That's just so key, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Being attentive and being there, and listening, because man, you're going to hear where God's working, and he, cause he's always working. He's always doing something, and sometimes we can get so caught up in our own, struggles and trials and different things that, you're kind of like, well, God, where are you? What are you doing? And it's like,
right.
He's working, a million things behind you. And sometimes you just got to stop and turn around and look, So yeah, just being attentive to that. And, it's kind of having that, you got to zoom out a little bit, from everything to where you can kind of see it all kind of happening.
Man. Well, Brian, I know your wife, Kim, is a worship leader and you guys lead together, and that's got to be so much fun. Dude, if you could tell our worship leaders that are listening one piece of advice when it comes to leading a band, connecting with your musicians, and even like anything that we've covered today, because it's been just gold after gold, what would be that one thing that you would say, hey, this is what you got to do?
Man, I think first and foremost, man, coming to these moments, whatever it is, like sometimes my wife and I will do some things that's just very, very small, maybe just 10 people. And it's just, we're leading for these people, or it could be, a church service or whatever. But I think going into those moments of just like, hey, I'm going to come and just be just a part of this moment that I feel like God's going to come and do something in, and just really just kind of being open and vulnerable and just allowing yourself to be kind of used by God, just come in. A lot of times, going into a moment, I'm like, God, just thank you for this opportunity that I get to come and be a part of this, Thank you that I get to be with these musicians. I get to play music. I get to do this. I get to help lead your people in worship, and may what I do be be pleasing in that, and may I not be a distraction for people. May I play and do what needs to be done for these songs, but it's not something so out of context that it takes people away from the moment of worship, and being in that moment. You don't want to be a distraction for people. You don't want to be something that could hinder somebody, because of what you're trying to do, something flashy or whatever, in this. It's like, no, just do what needs to happen. Be just kind of sensitive to those moments, be vulnerable in those moments, and be open for what the Lord wants to do, in those times, because you might go in and here's our set. We got it all ready. And then, oh, actually, I think we're going to change that. I feel like we need to do this song, and just be open to those moments, because it's like, man, whatever the Lord wants to do is going to be the right thing, So it's like,
right. That's a great point.
It's like, we can kind of plan and think, okay, yeah, let's do this. And then you get there and you're just like, man, I really feel like the Lord wants to say this through what we need to sing, and you just be like, let's just change this song and do this, and man, powerful things come from that, and incredible stories come from that. But just being willing to be in those moments and to be just open to the change, and to what the Lord might be doing in those moments.
Wow. Definitely don't rush the moment. That's what I'm hearing right there.
Yeah.
I love it, man. Well, Brian, dude, I'm so pumped. We've got a couple things that we've been able to do. I mean, you've played on the hymns albums that I've put out. You've played on the Bridges Nashville stuff. Of course, you played with Big Daddy for so long and Lauren Daigle, and the list can go on and on. But one of the things I'm super stoked that you and I are working on right now, we're actually making a drum bundle, like a drum folder for loops and one shots, and it's going to come out real soon. And when it does, we'll be sure to share it in some of the show notes. But I think it's going to be a great thing for like resources for worship songwriters, because a lot of the loops that are in there are just like straight ahead beats. We're calling it Vanilla Drip, which is just a fun name. Oh my gosh, man. Brian, you're like one of the best dudes on the planet. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I am so honored to be a part of this. And, just if I can just share just a little bit of what I know, and just thank you for doing that and getting it out there. But man, thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for having me along to be a part of this. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Curtis Parks. To learn more and to find resources for worship leaders and teams, you can visit curtisparks.com.